Now, for more on this conversation, we're now joined by Roshan, Dadoo, the National Coordinator of South African Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions BDS Coalition. Roshan, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Now, as we saw in the insert, the BDS Coalition, together with other trade unions, picketed outside the AGOA summit in its final day today. Were your grievances heard? Did your message resonate or get to the people that you wanted it to get to?
I'm sure it did, because nobody likes to know that there's people protesting outside. And I think it was a really successful and vocal protest, as you heard from Comrade Vavi just now. Trade unions were with us, even unions who had participated within the first labour forum, apparently, that they've held alongside the AGOA summit this time, came out to support us. And I think it's just important that people know that South Africans don't think it's possible to do trade with apartheid Israel as normal, particularly when we're watching this genocide unfold. And we know that it's the United States government that is funding the genocide, that is enabling the genocide to take place.
I mean, do you think that this protest was anticipated by the organizers of the summit? It seems as though the protest was not really within the vicinity of where AGOA was taking place. Was this anticipated? It seemed that very tight security was placed in order to make sure that the picket is a bit far away from where the summit was taking place.
I mean, of course, you know, whenever they hold these sort of events, there's extra security. And hopefully they did know, they did anticipate that South Africans are not going to allow our government and the American government at ministerial level to meet together talking about trade and business as usual in a situation where, on the other hand, our government is taking a very strong stand in support of the Palestinian people and their just struggle, and in which we know that America, in fact, just yesterday, Biden had been pushing through this bill that would increase additional military aid to the apartheid state of Israel. And yesterday, the House of Representatives approved that bill, which will mean another $14 billion going to the Israeli military. And when you look at the TV, when you look at the news and you see how is that being spent? It's literally being spent on bombing a civilian population that is already besieged in an open-air prison, as the UN has called Gaza, where no food, water, fuel or medical supplies are allowed in or out, where the people are trapped, literally trapped inside. That is what that military aid from America is going to support in apartheid Israel. So I think, you know, hopefully they did realize that South African people are going to protest, that we don't think this is okay. And you can't just be doing normal business as usual in this context when everybody around the world is watching what's going on, where people around the world are protesting. I mean, in the UK, in the States, where the governments are not half as supportive as our government claims to be towards the Palestinian struggle. There are thousands of people, tens of thousands of people coming out, blocking train stations, protesting, demonstrating, you know, so hopefully they did expect that, because I think it is particularly for South Africans the case that we feel the pain of the Palestinian people, having fought against apartheid ourselves. And of course, this is now way, way worse than apartheid. But we feel that solidarity and that international solidarity with people protesting around the world, because we made the same call on the international community in support of our struggle to take action, to protest, to boycott, divest, and ultimately impose sanctions and an arms embargo against a state that commits the crime of apartheid. And in the case now as we can see, of war crimes and genocide in the case of apartheid Israel.
Speaking about the involvement of the South African government, and as opposed to what they say and what they do, we saw that Turkey has taken a stance to recall its ambassador in Israel. Will we foresee the possibility of the closure of the Israeli embassy in Pretoria?
Well, I certainly hope so, and I think our demand is getting louder and louder, and more people are taking it up. Everybody is saying, why do we have an apartheid Israeli embassy in Pretoria? Why do we have a full ambassador representing an apartheid state? It's not the time for diplomacy. It's the time to cut diplomatic links. It's the time to cut trade links as well. And we don't want to see this embassy here. As we called on people internationally during apartheid to say, we don't want you to have diplomatic relations with an apartheid state. What are we going to say to them? You think they're going to listen to us? They're bombing Gaza like we can see it on our TV screens. They're killing children. They're acting with impunity against all international and humanitarian law. And the country that can rein them in, the United States, is enabling it. They're voting against even a small humanitarian pause they vetoed in the UN Security Council. So there's absolutely no reason to have that embassy here. And I really hope, yes, as you're saying, that this call is getting louder and louder. And there's been examples around the world recently, Bolivia and others, that have cut diplomatic ties. And we really have to. It makes no sense. And it puts us on the wrong side of history rather than putting ourselves as South Africa on the right side of history as the country that has fought and managed to get rid of apartheid, put ourselves again on the right side of history now as a post-apartheid government, and be in a position later when there's a possibility of dismantling apartheid, ending the occupation, and looking towards some kind of future Palestine in which everybody has equal rights and the Palestinian people have justice and the right to return for the refugees, of course, from Palestine to their homes, would be in a much better position to play that kind of diplomatic role. But if we continue to side with an apartheid regime, I think we're going to miss the point totally. And it's just a symbol of how confused perhaps our government is at the moment. On the one hand, we are working really hard through the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Department of International Relations within the UN, within the African Union, to really push forward and try to make a difference within those multilateral fora. But then why do we have this apartheid embassy here? It must go. It must go, and the ambassador must be declared persona non grata and forced to leave.
All right, Roshan, thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure having you on the show, and thank you for joining us. That was the National Coordinator of South African Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Coalition, Roshan Dadoo.